Hello and welcome to Gatecrashers. Today we are exploring Gate 62. In human design, Gate 62 is the gate of detail, of naming. It's the precise word. And in this Gatecrashers episode, we explore this energy through the character of Arthur. This series brings the human design gates to life through story and pattern and lived expression. And Gate 62 explores calibration, exactly the right amount of detail, naming a thing so the world can actually use it, and looking at when precision tips over into a wall of data. If you're studying human design or exploring your own chart, this may well help you recognize the energy in your life. Arthur names things for a living, and he's very good at it. This is not quite the same thing as saying he is easy to be around, but we'll come to that. Here is the thing about a man like Arthur. The world arrives at him as a great fog of vague intentions. People wanting things, meaning things, gesturing at things they can't quite say. And Arthur's gift, his actual gift, is to reach into the fog and pull out the exact word for what's in there. Not a word, the word. The one that makes the thing real enough for everyone else to pick up and use. It's a rarer talent than it sounds, and the world runs on it far more than the world admits. The trouble is that Arthur, for most of his life, mistook the gift for something it wasn't. He thought the gift was detail, more of it. He thought that if one precise word was good, then 40 were better, and a footnote better still, and that the way to make a thing unmistakable was to bury it so deep in qualifications that nobody could possibly misunderstand it. By which point, of course, nobody could understand it at all, or they'd just stop listening altogether. Years ago, when the post of senior archival director came up, Arthur arrived at the interview with 3 wheelbarrow-full cross-referenced appendices, a color-coded chart, and a look at the historical that's the word. I've chosen a word I can't even say. Depreciation. That's what I'm trying to say. Depreciation of the paperclip since the late Bronze Age to the personal date of his interview, and a 30-minute opening statement on the precise ambient humidity at which ink begins to smudge on a standard requisition form. He didn't answer the board's questions. He dismantled them. He labeled the grammar and handed the pieces back. The board, glazed and gently despairing, gave the job to a charismatic abstract noun who had smiled and said he wanted to maximize potential. It stung. It stung in the exact spot the gift lives. Arthur had more truth in those 3 wheelbarrows than anyone in the room, and he had buried it so thoroughly that not 1 ounce of it ever reached another living soul. The wall he'd built to protect the message was the very thing that smothered the life out of it. So Arthur, being a sensible man, drew a lesson from this. Unfortunately, he drew the wrong lesson. He decided the problem had been his audience, that people simply couldn't be trusted with detail. And he went looking for a job where detail was the whole point and nobody was permitted to glaze over. He found it at the Interdimensional Customs and Transit Authority, where he became Chief Logistics Clerk, the man who decides what everything is officially called before it's allowed to cross into actuality. He was, he felt, finally home. And although he would have vehemently denied it, in triplicate, he was still building walls. Which brings us to a grey, wet morning at Arthur's counter, which was actually a pristine mahogany desk. On his left, a stack of blank form 4BA. Actually, there, sitting in a nice, neat stack. On his right was an ink pad, and in front of him stood a customer in a coat that seemed to have more pockets than was strictly legal, and he was holding a wooden crate. "Next," Arthur said. His voice was crisp and precise. The customer hoisted his crate onto the counter. It rattled with a tinny, metallic sound. "Morning, Chief. Got a shipment here. Need a stamp." Arthur pulled a fresh form toward him and dipped his fountain pen. "Very well. Description of goods for the manifest, please." "Sporks," the customer said cheerfully. Arthur's pen hovered exactly 3 millimeters above the paper. He did not look up. "I beg your pardon?" "Sporks, governor," the customer repeated, leaning in. "You know, sporks. I got a crate of them." Arthur lowered his pen. He looked at the customer. He looked at the crate. He looked back at the customer. "Sir, this is the logical manifest registry. We do not register sounds made by wet boots. We register items. What is the precise mechanical nomenclature of the object?" "It's a spork," the customer said, tapping the crate. "It's a spoon and a fork together in one handy tool. It's a spork, isn't it?" Arthur sighed, a tiny exhale that precisely measured his disappointment in humanity. "Sir, language is a structure built on logic. A spoon is an implement possessing a shallow concave bowl designed for the containment and transport of liquids or semi-solids. A fork is an implement possessing parallel lines, tines even." "A fork possesses parallel tines designed for the piercing and retention of solid matter. They are mutually exclusive architectural principles. You cannot simply smash their names together like two colliding trains and expect me to log it." "Well," the customer said, "someone did smash them together. Look." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a shiny metal object, and set it on the desk. Arthur adjusted his spectacles and stared at it with a deep and profound disapproval. It was, indeed, a spoon, but the front edge of the bowl had been violently notched into 4 short, stubby teeth. It looked like a utensil that had suffered a terrible industrial accident. "This," Arthur said softly, "is an abomination." "It's efficient," the customer argued. "You can eat your soup, then stab your sausage. One tool, saves space." "It saves nothing, sir, because it violates the fundamental laws of categorization," Arthur said, his voice rising by a fraction of a decibel. "If I file this under spoon, the archival department will reject it, because it has prongs. If I'd file it under fork, the inventory system will flag it because it contains a reservoir. It is a logistical paradox, a tool that does 2 jobs simultaneously and performs both of them poorly. You cannot eat soup with this, the liquid will escape through the gaps in the teeth. You cannot stab a sausage with this, the bowl will prevent the prongs from achieving proper penetration. It is an instrument of pure, unadulterated frustration." "Look, mate," the customer said, wiping his brow. "I've got 500 of these in the box. I just need you to write sporks on this line so I can get them to the cafe down the road." "I cannot write sporks," Arthur said flatly. "There is no such word in the official Imperial Directory of Material Objects. If I allow spork into the registry today, Tomorrow, someone will bring me a knork. By next week, the system will be flooded with knives. By the end of the fiscal quarter, people will be clearing customs with an unholy trinity of cutlery, and the entire logical grid of the civilized universe will collapse into an anarchic soup of vowels. The customer blinked. Oh, well, right, Gov. So what are you going to write down? Arthur picked up his pen. His eyes shone with the calm, terrifying beauty of a man who has found a detail that needs anchoring. I am going to log this shipment under its correct, lawful, and meticulous description. He began to write, his pen scratching rhythmically across the parchment, speaking aloud as he went, ensuring every syllable was perfectly accounted for. 500 units of hybridized manual alimentary ingestion utensils, type G, comprising an integrated convex fluid retention basin terminating in 4 abbreviated axial piercing tines. He stopped. He looked at the sentence that he'd written and he nodded. There. Precision. The customer stared at the form. Well, sounds like a weapon used by a space marine, Gov. It is the correct description of the facts, sir, Arthur said. He picked up his heavy brass stamp, breathed a tiny puff of condensation onto the rubber face, and slammed it down with a satisfying, definitive thud. And the facts are the only thing keeping the wolves from the door. He slid the manifest across the counter. Have a productive day, sir, and please use a spoon for your broth. It's what separates us from the quadrupeds. The customer picked up his crate, thoroughly bewildered, and shuffled out. Arthur took a clean linen handkerchief from his breast pocket and wiped a microscopic speck of dust from his ink pad. The details were safe. The universe was secure. The universe stayed secure until about 2:30. That was when the manifest came back. Down the line in a bonded warehouse, a tired clerk had run hybridized manual alimentary ingestion utensils type G through every directory in the building and found precisely nothing, because Arthur had invented the description on the spot. The crate could not be matched. The crate could not be released. The crate sat, and the cafe down the road, which had been promised 500 sporks for the lunch rush, served 400 bowls of soup to people holding nothing to eat them with. The complaint, when it reached Arthur's pristine desk, arrived as a form, which Arthur appreciated, and in the reason field, in another clerk's blunt hand, it said, "Goods undeliverable. Description matches no known object. Sender insists they are," and I quote, "just sporks." Arthur read it twice, and something in him, some load-bearing wall he had spent 30 years reinforcing, went very quiet. He had done it again. He had taken the most precise thing in the building and made it communicate nothing. Not because it was wrong, but because it was too much. It had matched no object because it was too much object. The man had handed him the right word. 1 syllable, instantly usable, understood by a hungry teenager at a till. And Arthur had buried it under a sentence that sounded like a weapon used by a space marine. And the burying had cost a cafe its lunch and a crate its freedom. And here at last, Arthur did the most Gate 62 thing a person can do. Not the thing he'd always believed it was, but the real thing. He took a fresh form for AB. He uncapped his pen, and under description of goods, in his immaculate handwriting, he wrote one word: spork. He looked at it for a long moment. the way a man looks at something that had cost him a great deal to understand. And then he sneezed. Or maybe he didn't. Okay, maybe he didn't. Then because it was still Arthur. And he couldn't change his nature. He opened the official Imperial Directory of Material Objects to the S page. And with the calm and indescribable joy of a man anchoring a detail that genuinely needs anchoring, he created a new entry. Spork, brackets N, a single eating implement consisting or combining the bowl of a spoon and the tines of a fork. And then, after a pause, he did the bravest editing of his life. He stopped right there. The most precise thing he had ever written, precisely because it was the least. The universe did not, in fact, collapse, and the cafe patrons were able to eat their soup with their sausages. This is Gate 62, the gate of detail sitting in the throat center, the place where a thing finally turns into a word the rest of us can carry off and use. It runs on collective logic, and it reaches up the chart to Gate 17 in the Ajna, the gate of opinions. 17 holds the grand shape of the thing, and 62 finds the exact words to make it real. And together, the channel of acceptance, the design of an organized and skilled mind. Without the 62, the finest opinion in the world stays stuck up in the clouds, unsayable. But here is the trap. The gate lays for people who carry it. And it caught Arthur for 30 years because the gift is never about more detail. This is the trap it lays. It's about the right amount of detail. Enough to make the thing land and not one word more. Too little detail and it stays a fog. Too much and it becomes a wall, which is only a much denser kind of fog, really. The whole of the art, the entire medicine is calibration. Knowing that sometimes the correct, lawful, and meticulous name for 500 metal hybrids in a crate is simply spork. And some while later, a man came to the counter in a coat with too many pockets and a crate of something that did not yet have a name. Arthur looked up and smiled. Next, he said. Thank you for joining me on another story of Gatecrashers. And as always, I hope you are loving yourselves wildly, using your sporks sensibly, and as always, you will continue to go gently.